The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Beneath the sprawling Bodhi tree, the Buddha gathered his disciples. Among them was a young man named Ananda, carrying an unseen weight. His face bore a shadow of regret, and his shoulders seemed laden with an invisible burden. The Buddha noticed Ananda's solemn expression and addressed him with a gentle tone. "Ananda, what troubles your heart today?" Ananda hesitated, his gaze fixed on the ground, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "Master," Ananda began, "my past haunts me like an unrelenting shadow. I cannot escape the mistakes I have made." His words carried a sorrow that seemed to echo among the gathered disciples. The air grew still as all attention turned to Ananda's pain. The Buddha nodded with understanding, his eyes filled with compassion. "Ananda, our past can be a teacher, but it must not become a chain." He then gestured toward a sack of stones lying nearby and a large clay bowl. "Ananda, pick up that bowl and fill it with stones, each representing a regret you carry." Ananda hesitated but complied, placing stone after stone into the bowl. Each stone represented a moment of regret, a mistake, or a lost opportunity. The bowl grew heavier with each addition, until Ananda's arms began to strain under its weight. The Buddha observed silently, his gaze steady yet kind. When Ananda had filled the bowl, the Buddha spoke again. "Now, Ananda, carry this bowl as we walk through the village." The other disciples watched with curiosity as Ananda lifted the heavy bowl. His movements labored. The group began their walk, the village bustling with life as evening descended. Villagers greeted them warmly, their faces radiant with joy and respect. However, Ananda could barely lift his head to acknowledge them. The weight of the bowl consumed all his strength and attention. As they passed a marketplace, a child offered Ananda a flower, but he could not reach to accept it. The child looked confused and tugged at his mother's hand, whispering questions. The mother smiled kindly but said nothing, her eyes following the group as they moved on. Ananda's steps grew slower, and sweat beaded on his forehead. The bowl seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. At last, as they reached the outskirts of the village, Ananda could bear it no longer. He set the bowl down with a thud and collapsed. Another day. Another morning dawned softly, its light casting long shadows beneath the leaves of the ancient Bodhi tree. The Buddha gathered his disciples once more, his serene presence anchoring their wandering minds like a lighthouse in mist. He held up an empty clay jar, its smooth surface catching the sunlight in a warm, inviting glow. "This jar represents your mind," he said gently, his voice as steady as the river flowing nearby. "Tell me, disciples, what happens when the jar is filled with clean water after holding muddy water?" The disciples exchanged glances, their expressions contemplative as they considered the metaphor laid before them by the Master. One of them ventured to speak. "Master, the muddy water overflows, leaving the jar purified by the clean water." The Buddha smiled with approval, his gaze tender yet penetrating as it fell upon the young Ananda. Ananda wiped a tear that slipped down his cheek, his heart swelling with a newfound sense of belonging. "Love does not discriminate," the Buddha concluded, "for it sees not the ripples on the surface but the infinite depth beneath. It begins with mindfulness. Dear Ananda, observe the thoughts of your past without judgment, like clouds drifting in the sky." The Buddha then filled the clay jar with muddy water, a deliberate act that caught everyone's attention. "This murky water," he said, holding it aloft, "symbolizes the regrets and mistakes that cloud your perspective." With a measured hand, he poured clear water into the jar, the muddy liquid spilling out onto the earth. Each drop of clear water, the Buddha explained, represents acts of mindfulness and compassion displacing the weight of past burdens. With every kind thought or action, You pour clean water into your soul, purifying the murky depths within. Ananda watched closely, his heart stirred by the simple yet profound act unfolding before his eyes. But Master, Ananda said softly, how do I stop the muddy water from returning and clouding my mind again? The Buddha chuckled softly, his laughter like the rustling leaves in a gentle breeze. You cannot stop the rain, Ananda, but you can tend the flow of the jar, ensuring the muddy water never overwhelms the cleansing drops. He leaned forward, meeting Ananda's gaze with a compassionate intensity that spoke directly to the young disciples. Soul, the jar will always face storms. Yet its essence is determined by how much purity you choose to refill it with, the Buddha continued, sharing a story about a weary sculptor who worked tirelessly to transform a rugged stone into art. Each day, the sculptor chipped away at imperfections, uncovering beauty hidden beneath the rough exterior through perseverance and intention. In the same way, Ananda, your deliberate acts of mindfulness and compassion will slowly reveal your true nature. Ananda nodded, the weight in his chest loosening slightly as he absorbed the wisdom in the Master's parable. The disciples around him listened closely, the Buddha's words resonating as though addressing the innermost chambers of their hearts. The sculptor could not finish his work in a single day, just as clarity cannot be forced upon the mind. With patience, determination, and kindness, you too can create a masterpiece of your life, one moment at a time. The Buddha took a handful of water from the nearby river, letting it trickle between his fingers before speaking again. Observe this water. It flows naturally, never clinging to the hands that hold it. Such is the way of life. The past clings when you resist its flow, but its power diminishes when you embrace it and let it go. Ananda bowed his head deeply, gratitude and a sense of renewal washing over him like the river's gentle current. Another day, another lesson became etched into the hearts of the disciples, each drop of wisdom a guide to inner clarity. Another day, another quiet dawn arrived, spreading hues of gold and amber across the tranquil riverbank where the Buddha stood. The disciples gathered near him, their footsteps soft on the dew-kissed grass as they awaited the Master's wisdom. The Buddha pointed to the flowing river, its waters reflecting the morning light like a moving canvas of infinite renewal. This river, he began, his voice steady as the current, holds the secret to freeing oneself from the weight of the past. Ananda knelt beside him, his eyes fixated on the water that carried leaves downstream with effortless grace. Master, how does the river teach us to release what clings to our hearts and minds? Ananda asked earnestly. The Buddha smiled gently, bending to pick up a leaf that had fallen at his feet, fragile yet vivid with life. Observe this leaf, he said, placing it upon the water and watching as the current carried it away effortlessly. The river does not cling to the leaf, nor does it resist, it simply flows, allowing all to pass through. Ananda nodded slowly, his thoughts carried away with the drifting leaf. Seeking meaning in the Master's analogy, the Buddha continued, the past is like debris in the river. If you cling to it, you disrupt the natural flow. But, Master, Ananda interjected, his voice tinged with lingering doubt, how do I stop myself from holding on to my regrets? The Buddha's gaze softened as he gestured for Ananda to sit beside him, the river's melody filling the space between words. Releasing the past begins with recognizing it for what it is, a memory, not a chain binding you forever. Each moment you hold on to regret, you anchor yourself to a place where growth cannot flourish, the Buddha explained. He then recounted the tale of a merchant who lost his entire fortune in a tragic fire one fateful night. Instead of mourning his loss endlessly, the merchant chose to rebuild, brick by brick, his livelihood and his peace. His decision to act in the present, rather than dwell in the ashes, restored his life and his purpose. Ananda listened intently, the weight of the story settling over him like a balm soothing his restless soul. The fire, the Buddha said, could not be undone, but the merchant's future was shaped by his actions in the moment. He rose and walked to the water's edge, his bare feet meeting the cool, lapping waves with deliberate, mindful steps. Be like the river, Ananda, he said, release what no longer serves you, and embrace the flow of the present. The Buddha turned to his disciples, his words now directed to all who had gathered, their faces reflecting the morning light. Do not fight the current of life by clinging to what has already passed. Let it drift away, naturally and freely. One of the disciples asked, Master, does releasing the past mean forgetting it entirely, as though it never existed? The Buddha's smile deepened, his response measured and infused with profound clarity. No, my dear disciple, it does not. To release the past is not to forget it but to acknowledge it without allowing it to define who you are. Memories, both joyful and painful, are like stones upon the riverbed. They shape the flow but do not stop it. Ananda leaned forward, his gaze meeting the Buddha's as he felt the resonance of those words in his heart. But what if the pain of the past feels too great to let go? How do we overcome such sorrow? The Buddha paused, his silence filled with compassion, before picking up another leaf and holding it between his fingers. Pain, like this leaf, appears fragile and insurmountable, yet it too can be carried away by the steady current of time. To overcome sorrow, you must trust the river's flow and open your hands, allowing it to take what weighs you down. The disciples reflected deeply, their thoughts aligning with the river's course, which spoke a language they could now begin to understand. The Buddha knelt and placed the second leaf upon the water, watching it drift and vanish into the distance. Release is not an act of forgetting, but an act of freedom, where you reclaim the present moment as your own. Ananda exhaled slowly, as though releasing a breath he had unknowingly held, and whispered, I will try, Master. The Buddha touched Ananda's shoulder, his gesture a reassurance as steady as the flow of wisdom that had guided them. Do not fear failure, Ananda, he said. Even the river changes its course with time, yet it continues to flow onward. Another day, another lesson was etched into the hearts of the disciples, carried like leaves along the river of life. The Buddha's voice grew softer, each word carefully chosen, as though he were offering the traveler's journey as a gift to them all. Then, an elder approached and said, Be still, dear traveler, for the winds pass, and the lake remembers its nature. Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.